I'm John Scholes, President and CEO of the Downtown Seattle Association. Welcome to this episode of Seattle Speaks. I'm here in the Cascade neighborhood of downtown Seattle at the offices of Skanska with Vice President of Skanska, Tony Stewart. Tony, thanks for taking time and having us in this gorgeous office space.
Appreciate the opportunity.
There's a few folks working in here, and I understand you're going to have a few more in the coming weeks.
Limited capacity with all of the things that all of us are dealing with on social distancing and things like that. But we are wanting to re-engage with our people and provide another alternative other than the home office environment we've all been living with. So, and we also know that this community needs us here. There's a lot of small businesses that are around us here in the Cascade neighborhood, and supporting them is awfully important to us. So that's the other motivation behind it.
How many people do you have in this space normally?
Normally we've got probably about 80, 85.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting in our world in construction, our staff count is closer to 200, and the lion's share of those folks are on job sites, in job trailers and offices and things like that. But here, we're about an 80 count office. The other thing that's interesting is in our industry, in construction, we were deemed essential from the outset. So when I think it was March 26th, when the governor's proclamation came down, we were quickly, for most of our work and most of our clients, became deemed essential work. So we quickly pivoted and needed to, for our clients to keep our projects running. You know, John, if there was an industry that was or is somewhat innately capable to deal with this curveball in the context of keeping people safe, it's our industry. And so that
core value of Skanska's and
I mean, we have 4 major cornerstones in our value, and one of them is care for life. And simply put, if we can't work safe, we don't work at all. It is black and white. So in the notion of focusing on safety and well-being, which is kind of running in our veins, and I was talking to someone earlier, if I were to say to you, John, what's your PPE? A year ago, you probably wouldn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah, that acronym was not in my lexicon.
Yeah, in our industry, it runs in our veins. It's deep. It's personal protection equipment, and it is very much a part of who we are. And we like the fact that now it's everybody's construct, and so.
The folks in the office understand it. The folks on the job site understand it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there's a few things I want to cover with you, but while we're on the topic of sort of office and development and construction, you've had a long career on the architecture side, previously with MBBJ and working for construction companies in Seattle and development. What's your perspective on how the office changes over the next several years?
Yeah, and you're hearing lots of thoughts around what that is, and so what my crystal ball might share is, I'm a believer in the office space. I do think in the short term there is some moves, and we've made some of them here in our office. But long term, I'm a believer that people have a great need to connect with each other, and in the built environment, creative, whether in design or in the build side, there's a huge connectivity of people and how teams work together. And so that isn't going to change. And I think there's such an attraction and such differentiation around people connecting with each other in a safe way. I don't envision the office going away anytime soon.
Were you a big work from home or virtual work culture before?
No, not at all. Not one bit. And so launching us all forward in that, I could barely open WebEx. And so now it's Zoom, it's WebEx, it's Teams, it's lots of channels to turn into. And so I like the fact that we've taken this big leap forward. I believe that we're going to have more choices going forward, and there's going to be some amount of virtual meetings that are so much more efficient. We're still going to maintain that. But in the realm of collaboration, ideation, and I'm a believer, there's no technology that will ever be faster between something in my head and the end of my fingers and a pencil flowing out an idea on a piece of paper, nothing will be any quicker or any more invigorating. So keeping that alive and that vibe alive is where we come together here. That's my humble
so
crystal.
options and flexibility as
Options
sort of
and flexibility.
sustaining.
I do think outdoor space and the connection to the street.
Yeah.
I'm loving the fact that I'm seeing in the urban environment the engagement in the street, and much of what you would experience if you went to Europe or Italy or any place like that that really connects yourself in an urban setting. So having the office conference rooms in an outdoor space, whether it was fortuitous or not, what I think the moves that were made at 2&U as public realm, covered when it's in the environment we live here in the Pacific Northwest, but to be able to connect and meet with people in perhaps maybe psychologically more comfortable spaces, aka outdoors, I think you're going to see more of that. And those differentiations, those assets are going to be more attractive.
Yeah, and I would say we need more of that, particularly in a city that's so conscious of the outdoors and the environment and getting outside in the wilderness. We haven't brought that into the urban areas and urban development enough.
Yeah, great parks in the city.
Yeah.
And places for gathering for all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and you guys, I think, hit a home run on that with
so I see more of that, and I see what we're developing over in Bellevue at Northeast 8th engages more, actually throughout, it's a tower we're currently developing, more of that outdoor space and that connection to outdoor. So I see more of that if there was some design moves to be made going forward.
So you spoke to some of the adjustments you've had to make around safety and virtual work, but are there other changes you've had to make as an organization and as a leader to serve your clients and your teams?
Yeah, it's a great
this
question.
Period of just sort of massive change and uncertainty?
Yeah, the connecting with people is super hard now. But it's for us in our leadership, and the moves we made is to press in. And by that I mean, instead of sharing less, we're defaulting, and our leadership style has pivoted to sharing more, because absent of, when there's silence and there's no narrative, people fill in the blanks. And so we're over communicating, we're many additional touch points, and all while knowing that glue, even though we're afar apart physically, is what our people need. And pretty uncertain times, and whatever alleviation through comfort matters. And so it's been good, I think healthy for all of us as leaders. One person at a time, not, everybody's coping with this thing differently. And so dealing with one person at a time or teams at a time. And so whether it's one-on-ones, and I know we'll talk about it here in a little bit, the topic of education around racism is another venue that we're using, small group conversation, safe harbor, and allowing people to connect that would never otherwise connect. And so we're seeing the value in that. And so that's probably one of the bigger moves, is pressing in and connecting with those folks.
You mentioned the connections that you're making between employees and small groups around racism. What else is Skanska doing to address systemic racism and diversity, equity, inclusion in your organization?
I'm glad you asked that question. We're hitting it head on, absolutely hitting it head on, and we're hitting it head on in the way of a mindset of a zero tolerance. We have that mindset in the context of how we have zero tolerance around what's safe for our people, and we have zero tolerance for racism, and we know we have issues, and what can we do about it? So we're primarily, within our company nationally and here locally, dealing with it through education. And so between education and facilitated conversation, that's been the primary vehicle to allow people to talk in what was otherwise awkward, strange, uncomfortable points of conversation. So specifically, there's a 25-part series through Yale University.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the African American History, 1863 to present. And we're doing this over a 25-week period. We're about a third into it right now, and every Thursday morning, we just had one this morning, we watch for about a 45 or 50-minute lecture with this guy, Jonathan Holloway at Yale University, who teaches this class. And so we're in the classroom at Yale, and then we come back as a group. We have these breakout groups. There's usually 3 or 4 of them, have a facilitator, and we actually have questions prompted that then facilitate some really healthy conversations that we never would have had otherwise. And then we come back together and we do report outs. And you would think, wow, 90 minutes a week for 25 weeks. And it is like a flash of an eye. It goes by so quick. And there's never enough time because there's such a desire to have conversations. So these conversations, maybe a dozen, or so people in this safe harbor talking about racism and getting educated around it at the same time, that's been extremely healthy. That's one of the direct ways that we're dealing with it and hitting it head on.
Well, thanks for taking time to speak with me and about how you've had to adjust your leadership and the work that Skanska's doing to address systemic racism and your, I think, very rich and interesting perspective on sort of the future of the office. I sort of tend to agree with your outlook that the options and the flexibility is what's going to last and be embraced. And good to know that you're going to have more folks back here and supporting the local businesses in the neighborhood. And
absolutely.
And I should say too, thanks for your service on the Downtown Seattle Association Board, among your other civic engagements in the city. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Seattle Speaks.